If I could invite everyone to please take their seats. Our keynote speaker has arrived as we welcome him and all of you to the opening ceremony of the 2023 National Model United Nations, New York. As a few people are still taking their seats and you look around the room, although it's more difficult as it's dark, you will see people from 95 different countries. And without masks. And a representation of the United Nations, and we hope you stay in the committees as New York blooms in springtime around you, and the United Nations reaches out to youth with a sense of hope. You are the future, and we are honored by the presence of our keynote speaker, who will be introduced in a moment. One of the challenges, as many of you know because you host your own Model United Nations conference, is also to recognize the solemnity of the times in which we live. In a moment, I'm going to ask for your indulgence as we offer a moment of silence. For people of faith, we come out of a time that is a major holiday for 3 of the world's religions. We also are experiencing moments of violence, not only in one country, but in the peacekeeping missions of the United Nations. There are earthquakes, not in one, but several areas in the world, and those that select one region to focus on are sometimes criticized for not remembering all of the areas in which deserve our focus. So I ask you to think about your own intentions, to think about peace, to think about human rights, to think about development, and to think about what motivated you to come here tonight expressing your hope for the future as we take a moment of silence. Thank you. And now, as we continue this opening ceremony, I'd like to transition us to thinking about the opportunity that is presented by the distinguished keynote speaker that we have. And I'm grateful that I don't need to introduce His Excellency Csaba Kőrösi, because I would have done okay with the pronunciation, but I am much better off to be able to introduce the person who will introduce the keynote speaker, who is a longtime member of our advisory board. She is the co-founder of the Earth Negotiations Bulletin, the chair of the political science department at Manhattan College, and a longtime friend of National Model in the United Nations, dedicated to improving the quality of the educational component of this conference. Please welcome to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Pamela Jasek.
Thank you, Michael. Distinguished Secretary General, staff, delegates, faculty, and guests. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker for tonight's opening ceremony, the President of the 77th United Nations General Assembly, the Honorable Csaba Kőrösi. I expect that all of you are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, can I see a show of hands of those of you who mentioned the SDGs, any of them in your position papers? I thought so. Just over 10 years ago, a group of UN delegates started crafting those 17 goals and 169 targets. And while many contributed to this project over 13 negotiating sessions that spanned 16 months, This evening's keynote speaker co-chaired the entire intergovernmental process that developed the SDGs for eventual adoption as the central part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that was adopted by the UN General Assembly in September 2015. I had the privilege of taking part in that process and remember watching the outwardly calm ambassador shepherding this process through to its conclusion, and among many other things, ensuring that there was a separate goal for climate change and recognizing that maybe the number 17 wasn't so bad after all. As a career diplomat, Ambassador Kuroshi has spent his entire professional life in public service, combining national duties with assignments received from various international communities. He's had the privilege to serve as the ambassador and permanent representative of Hungary to the United Nations and as head of mission to Greece and the United Arab Emirates. He has also served as vice president of the 66th UN General Assembly, vice chair of the Bureau of the Third UN Conference on Human Settlements, and director for environmental sustainability of the Office of the President of the Republic of Hungary. As Director, State Secretary of the Office of the President of Hungary, he has served as a member of the High-Level Panel on Water, co-convened by the UN Secretary General and the President of the World Bank Group. He performed a similar role in the framework of the Water and Climate Leaders Panel, co-convened by the Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization and the President of UN Water. He is a founding member of the Hungarian Scientific Panel on Climate Change and a permanent invitee to the Presidential Committee on Sustainable Development at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences and the National Council on Sustainable Development at the Hungarian National Assembly. On June 7, 2022, the General Assembly elected Ambassador Kuroshi as president of the 77th session of the General Assembly by acclamation. So President Kuroshi, welcome to the National Model United Nations.
Thank you very much, Bram. We have known each other for many, many years, if you allow me in this way. Thank you much for the opportunity to be with you tonight. And I'm absolutely sure that you are very well trained how to negotiate. You're very familiar with all the procedures, all the big issues on the agenda of the United Nations, including the General Assembly. But what about now playing real? The very tough issues, the most complicated issues, without any game, without any softening of the issue, just the hard facts. If you agree, we can do it. Okay, then fasten seatbelts, let's go. So when talking about the United Nations and talking about this world, the United Nations is trying to navigate countries through, what are the most burning challenges in the world and what might be their consequences? Let's see the first, the most obvious one that is visible to all, wars. Despite the fact that we agreed in 2015 that we are going to pursue a sustainability agenda, a transformative agenda, and we knew that that agenda can only be implemented in time of peace, today we have 27 armed conflicts in the world, 27 wars, the largest one in Ukraine. But almost all continents are homes for different armed conflicts. Let us just not forget some of the consequences of the war in Ukraine, and those consequences actually go way beyond the borders of Europe. First and foremost, deepening distrust among member states, among 193 member states. The weakening security architecture, both regional and global. and arms control regimes, which were built over 40 years or even more, are now stopped developing and started dilapidating. Some of the procedures for verifications have been frozen, mostly by Russia. And last but not least, trade and technology cooperation that were considered as a kind of cementing power for international stability are now in a reverse mode. Trade has become a part of warfare. Another big crisis what we have to pay attention is food crisis. Though the prices of basic foods are now a little bit moderating, if we compare how many people went hungry or were grappling with acute food insecurity in 2019, their number was 135 million. By the end of the last year, this number went up to 345 million. It means 200 million people in danger zone within 2 years, 3 years actually. Energy crisis. Despite the fact that now the oil prices and gas prices are kind of stabilizing, the big challenge ahead of us is how to make the energy transition, what we agreed upon actually years ago in the SDG framework. The last year, the world has invested $2.4 trillion into all kinds of energy projects. Out of that sum, $1.4 trillion went to renewable energies, but partly because of the Ukrainian crisis, the war in Ukraine, the energy markets got significantly destabilized. What might be some of the impacts we have to take into consideration? First and foremost, fossil production is growing. So does the emission, despite the fact that we are running into a major climate crisis. And another point I would like to offer to your kind attention, the traditional supply-consumer roles in the world are being rearranged on the markets. The same amount of oil, the same amount of gas are going to different consumers, usually through longer ways. It means more greenhouse gas emissions for the same amount of energy. Debt crisis, we have to keep in mind. Today, only the sovereign debts are amounting much more than the total GDP of the world. And if you look at the debt service of the world's poorest countries, in 1 year, they went up by 35%. It is a trend and tendency that cannot be sustained. 76 countries out of the 193 member states of the United Nations are in the verge of bankruptcy or in the red zone. It means that more than 1/3 of the countries in the world are in a financially dangerous, very dangerous situation. Not only small ones, big economies as well. Water crisis. I will come back to this point a little bit later, but if we look at the available amount of fresh water and the way how we are using, the difference between the availability and the demand by 2040 will be 40%. 40% more demand than what water we are going to have by 2040. New waves of pandemics. We are about to leave the COVID behind ourselves, but according to the epidemiology and the predictive modeling experts, the chances of having another pandemic, at least as bad and as fatal as this was, within 25 years, those chances are 47 to 57%. If we look at the same pandemic, the chances within 10 years are between 22 to 28%. Both of them are way too high. So the question is not whether or not we are going to face a similar challenge, but when and whether or not we are prepared for that. Stagnation and in securing human rights. When conflicts are spreading in the world, usually human rights are suffering. And particularly those parts of the population who are the most vulnerable, and I would stress women and children. What are the key characteristics of the current crisis? And I only highlighted some of the features of this current crisis. You can see that we have a very, very complex crisis. It's a combined nature of crises, interconnected crises. We have crossed too many tipping points, or we are in a close vicinity of many, many tipping points. We are having a growing geopolitical differences despite the need of the increasing necessity for joint governance of global common goods. What does it mean in plain language? We are in a new chapter of history. How this new chapter of history can be characterized? It's a permanent crisis. It is characterized by weakness of global governance of global common goods. It is characterized by global rivalry, weakening global crisis management mechanism. So it is like two avalanches coming across to you. One from the geopolitical divide and geopolitical conflicts. The other one is from the non-sustainable way of development. And where you stand, they meet. They interact, they reinforce each other. It's a chain reaction of crises we are facing, and let's get prepared for this chain reaction of crisis in the near future. It's a combination of geopolitical, economic, social, and environmental consequences. There is a growing probability of rapid, massive breakdown in the most vulnerable countries and societies. On the other hand, this era, what we call Anthropocene era, is characterized by developments that also very rapid, coming from the field of science and technology, and they override some of the existing systems. You can very easily identify areas like life sciences, the mRNA, messenger RNA technology, which produced actually the vaccine for COVID, very rapidly growing and developing green energy technologies. Artificial intelligence has gone beyond any imagination, and we are very close to a breakthrough in quantum computing and future energy production. So these are, on one hand, the promising signs of the near future. On the other hand, new challenges. How are we going to regulate all these novelties? Now I will need your help. Please get your phones. And type the www.menti.com and the password, what you see, 6144-3780. The first question you will see is, could you reach? Slow? Okay. So the question is, what global issue worries you the most? Please type 1 or 2 words, the maximum.
Password. Old people's like 6144. Wow. 6144.
So once again, for those who could not type the password, it is 6144 3780. Okay, I think we are about to close now this voting. As you could see on the result, most of you are concerned about climate change, the poor state of human rights, wars, poverty, and hunger. Very much on the line, I also mentioned you what we are facing with in the United Nations. Thank you much for your answers, but it's still not over. Let's see the next question, and seeking your opinion. On the next question is, what crises have the largest probability to worsen, according to your opinion? Pick one. Distribute 100 points among those options. You can give 100 points for one of the options or distribute equally as you deem necessary. Nuclear conflict, conventional wars, debt crisis, inability of fulfilling human rights, climate change, water crisis. Okay. We are about to reach 800 votes, but the result is very, very clear. As in the first probe, you put climate change on the first place. And the second is the inability of fulfilling human rights. Both are very pertinent issues. Thank you much indeed. Then let's make a step ahead. What UN is doing in this crisis time, in this very complex crisis time. As you know, the UN, you are doing it right now as you participate in the Model UN. The United Nations is mirroring the state of affairs in the world, but the United Nations is also trying to find solutions. The solutions at the UN in crisis time and in time of complex crisis must be in the form of crisis management and transformation. Transformation because we have to save this world. We have to create conditions that will be better for the next generation, that where we are standing today. Let's see what do you think about this crisis management and transformation? Let's see the next question. Please take your phones. How is the UN delivering on your expectations? Is it superb? Pick one only. Superb, not efficient enough, needs reform, failing on all expectations. Okay, the tendencies are very clear. The UN needs reforms. About half of the 1,000 voters gave their vote to the notion that UN needs reforms. Yes, I agree, and that's exactly what we are engaging on. Then let's see, what does it mean in terms of reforming the UN and how crisis management and transformation can be perceived in the United Nations? So where do you think the UN needs upgrade? Solidarity, trust, cooperation, compromise, effectiveness, science, impact, accountability. Okay, the tendencies are very clear. Most of you believe that effectiveness is something that should be greatly improved in the United Nations, and accountability is also a very important factor. The third is impact, and the fourth is cooperation. Coming to the effectiveness. In crisis time, effectiveness means something different than in peacetime, in normal time. In normal time, effectiveness means to do roughly the same, but better. In crisis time, effectiveness means you have to change. You have to change in terms of transformation, in terms of crisis management. So now we are at the crossroad. We can decide to go business as usual and do everything what we did a little bit better. And you can guess where we end up. Or we go for transformation. If we go for a transformation, it requires bold, unprecedented actions. And it will require much more honesty and transparency in reporting for each and every member state. But it also requires institutional changes. If we change our objectives, if we change the way how we operate, we need to change the supporting institutions that are standing behind the member states. This change of the institutions must be at global and national levels equally. We need much more socially robust science. Interestingly, when the question was where would you see the most necessary upgrades, you put science relatively low. In my presidency, science is very high. for a very simple reason. If we want to find integrated solutions in a very complex crisis, it should be placed on scientific evidence. If we are placing solutions on ideological compromise, then those solutions will be very, very thin. If we are trying to find common political solutions on a bilateral or multilateral bargain only, without having solid scientific evidence, again, the result will be very thin and very weak. The scientific method is required to identify some of our tipping points. Where are we really? How far or how close are we from the edge? And we need to accelerate the uptake of innovations. It's also a matter of science, technology, and applications. The traditional ways of production, validation, and dissemination of scientific knowledge are not sufficient to result in meaningful processes of change. So we have to change really deep. Then let's see what kind of changes of regulations we might need. It might sound provocative a little bit to you, but we used to go according to the rules. We are very proud that our societies for hundreds of years followed rules, different rules. Laws, royal decrees, moral rules, religious rules, written, oral, but we knew what we should do. The rules were the milestones of the marching of the societies. What did we do about 20 years ago? We started creating goals. Goals because we understood that we are going to the wrong direction. And we have to change the course of events. We have to change the direction of our marching. And we started creating goals for sustainable development, for biodiversity, for climate, now for water, many others. But in some cases, those goals, which were designed to change our societies, change our operations, change our economies, went without changing the rules. So in some cases, you may find that our goals, which we all agreed, are in contradiction with our rules. So you can be absolutely law-abiding, law and order following society, and then you will not follow your agreed goals. It is one of the reasons we have now more than 3,000 court cases going against the governments, companies, and big entities on climate change. Mostly civil societies, some individuals, and smaller organizations are suing governments and big companies. So we have to somehow resolve this contradiction. Should it be that we give up the goals? Then we know where we will end up. Should we change some of our rules? Yes, as soon as possible. So, in order to make the big turnout, the big transformation, and the time, mind you, very short, what do we need? Game changers. Because it's not enough to do the same with a little bit faster, but we really need some bold, big changes. Let me give you some kind of examples for some game changers from real life. Some 2 weeks ago, we had the UN Water Conference, the first one since 1977. And it introduced quite a number of game changers, but it was based on some recognition. We had to recognize before and during the conference that first and foremost, we are in a water crisis. It's not a matter of future, it's present. We had to recognize that the hydrological cycle, which was altered by all of us, this hydrological cycle is part of the global common goods, which we are using jointly, we are changing jointly, and we are responsible jointly for this global water crisis. The third basic recognition was that we crossed the tipping point on water, on sweet water. First time in the history of humankind. The fourth was that if we want to successfully address this crisis of water, we need to go beyond current practices. And last but not least, we need to adjust the supporting system of our operations. So in this conference, we had 9,000 participants. It was hardly imaginable how those 9,000 could be homed in the UN headquarters. There was a request for 1,400 side events by civil society actors. The total capacity of the building was about 130 plus. And at the end of the conference, we had voluntary commitments at the range of 730. Governments, companies, other organizations, and the pledges that sum up only those that contained very exact figure in terms of dollars went up to $340 billion for the end of the third day. On this basis, by the end of the conference, when we had to summarize the results, and mind you, the so-called Water Action Agenda was a huge book, actually, these 730 commitments, but we distilled it to 9 major game changers. What might be these game changers? To give an idea, we need to integrate water and climate policies on national and global levels by 2030. We know that the water and climate are very closely interconnected. We know that 80% of the climate change is being felt through water. We know that most of the people who experience climate change basically experience it as a water crisis. But we never integrated our water and climate policies. The second is, next step out of it, we have to create the global water information system to support water, climate, and land management for social and economic resilience. We need to integrate the databases. For today, if your leaders are being asked, Mr. President, Prime Minister, how much water can we count on in this part of the world in the forthcoming 5 to 10 years, the honest answer is we don't know. But we could know it much better if we would integrate our databases globally and regionally as well. And we are going to do it. We are going to create the early warning system for all to help people safeguard their lives and properties. This will be ready hopefully by 2027. The next one is decoupling rising water consumption from the production of food and power, electricity. Why is it so important? About 80%, almost 80% of the fresh water consumption in the world today goes for the agriculture. If we add up the food processing, it's almost 85% of all our water consumption. By 2050, we will need more food by 30 to 50% compared to the today's level we have. It's very simple mathematics. There is simply not enough water for that. For the power generations, mostly from fossil fuels, is very, very thirsty business. If you take into consideration just the coal production, coal mining, coal cleaning, and coal burning for producing electricity, its water needs are equal to the water needs of 1 billion people. So we need to decouple the water consumption, food production, and the electricity or energy production. The fifth game changer, we need to develop the new economics on water for a sustainable world. It will be something absolutely new. We are working on it. I hope in a couple of months' time it will be ready. We used to think about water on one hand as a source of life, as the most essential element, on the other hand as a source of problems. But we very seldom think about water as a driver of economy, as a driver of our societies. Water represents various values. If we learn how to cherish and how to appreciate and how to handle those values, we can maximize the values and minimize the risks and consequences of the risks. We need to create, the sixth, the global education network for water. There is a huge shortage of water experts, starting from technicians to the PhDs, across the globe, mostly in developing countries. If we cannot boost the output of our education system for water experts, then the technologies will not be able to be implemented. The seventh is transboundary agreements, which has been known for more than 4,500 years. The first war for water was about 4,500 years ago in the today's territory of Iraq, in Mesopotamia. So we know that we have to manage our water resources, shared water resources jointly. But despite the many, many agreements what we have, we don't do it. Most countries don't do it. And the best legal framework so far is the UN Water Conference, the UN UNICEF Water Conference, which has been originally developed for Europe, actually, but now we are expanding it to the whole world. Just during the Water Conference, 10 countries from other continents indicated their willingness to join this framework convention. The eighth game changer is that within the UN, we need to change the institutional architecture to support the transformation. That includes a lot of changes within the appointment of a new UN water envoy. And the ninth, in order to make sure that whatever has been decided upon will be implemented and we will be in the position to check it, we need to convene an intergovernmental meeting in 2-3 years' time, regularly, the next one probably in 2023, to evaluate the implementation. So that's about the game changers. But some big events are still ahead of us in this year, also in terms of transformation. How are we going further? Some of the big events, let me mention you the Sendai framework. Many of you who are doing Model UN may know that it is a strategy jointly created by the UN member states for disaster risk reduction, and now it's at halfway through. But keeping in mind what we have decided upon at the Water Conference, this Sendai framework midterm review will also be a part of the new implementation as well. In autumn, September, we are going to have the SDG Summit. The 2030 agenda is halfway through in terms of time, but not in terms of the implementation of the decisions, what we agreed upon in 2015. So it is the time to decide whether or not we take our commitments very seriously, and whether or not we approach these issues with a different methodology and with a different political commitments. We are going to have, just talking to you, your generation, a declaration on future generations to commit to a long-term approach to safeguard the well-being of future generations. And I hope very much that it will not only be on the basis of rights, which is very much okay, but on the basis of responsibilities as well. Because we all inherit not only rights, but responsibilities. And keeping in mind where we started half an hour ago with the war, we need a new agenda of peace. I hope it will be developed within 1.5 to 2 years' time, and the member states can agree upon in the era of major conflicts and in the era of different mindsets, nevertheless. Finally, we need to explore new avenues and new pathways. As I mentioned, to do the same with a little bit faster may not be enough. We need game changers, and we need some new pathways and new avenues as well. One of them is going beyond GDP. Those of you who read the 17 SDGs may remember that one of the targets in the 17th SDG is exactly going beyond GDP. What does it mean? It's a new economic thinking of values. It's the economy of the sustainable development. It needs to be developed. We are working on it now. I'm afraid it may not be ready by the September SDG summit, but I'm very hopeful that it will be ready by September 2024, when we are going to have the Summit on Future. We need to strengthen in the UN the scientific validation, transparency, reliability on what we do and what we believe. There's a huge difference between what we believe happening and what we are really impacting. If we do the proper scientific validation, we can get a much better picture of where we are, where is the difference between the communication and the reality. And last but not least, we need institutional changes. This organization, though evolved since 1945, but basically still remains, to a very large extent, the relations and the set of power in 1945. We need to redesign the supporting system. If we do it all, then the result might be not only transformation, but strengthened multilateralism. The last word, what remained for me, to invite you. From time to time, we do town hall meetings with NGOs and sometimes with youth organizations. The next town hall meeting will be in the second half of this month. We need your knowledge, we need your opinion, we need your encouragement, and we need your participation. Thank you very much indeed.
We are grateful to His Excellency Csaba Kőrösi for his outreach to youth, which is exemplified by his participation here. Part of that is not only the town hall that he mentioned, but the intercession of his office in allowing us to use his General Assembly Hall for our closing session on this Friday. As he returns to his busy schedule, could we again give him a round of applause for his inspiration and his embrace of technology. Thank you for your participation, David.
Distinguished delegates, secretariats, faculty advisors, guests, and friends. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the National Model United Nations New York 2023 conference. Now, I know you're all raring to get going, but before we do, I wanted to take a moment to look back on what's brought us here and offer some advice looking forward to the week ahead. Collectively, our being here comes as the culmination of a long road. You have trained, debated, researched, and in the process, I'm sure, overcome challenges both shared and hidden. Reflect on that and be proud of that. We all have our own personal privileges and tribulations that paved the way to conference, and now your work, curiosity, and endeavor have brought you to New York for what I hope will be an unforgettable week. And just as you have been, behind the scenes, our staff have been working since May 2022 to make this conference possible. I will introduce our secretariat and staff at the end of these remarks, but in short, the volunteer team behind me and besides me put in a truly Herculean effort every year in the organization of committees, researching of topics, reviewing of position papers, and the drafting of background guides. In fact, on the task of background guides, I'll attempt to quantify that effort and share with you something that we circulated internally a few months ago. So the background guides that I hope you have used as the basis for your research were comprised of 176 drafts from beginning to end, have been reviewed and proofread 304 times, contain 503 pages, use 3,701 footnotes, are made up of 177,360 words, refer to the SDGs 574 times, the United Nations 4,200 times, and, as demonstrated by the next slide on the screen, for you lucky delegates in GA1, our first NMUN reference for a movie starring Nicolas Cage 1 time. This is just a small representative sample of the humbling dedication that our staff bring to their roles. Thank you for removing Nick Cage from the screen. My role of Deputy Secretary General is charged with being the primary substantive officer of the conference, essentially oversee our topics, content, and research. And much of my work over the past year has been suggesting things. Try researching X committee. Have you considered referencing this resolution? Please look into how this is funded. Now, the second this conference is over, I vow to uninstall Microsoft Word and never press the add comment forevermore. But before I do, I will open track changes just one more time and pose a few suggestions for you now on how to get the most out of the week ahead. Firstly, remember that most are in the exact same shoes as you. I remember in the hazy mists of time that was my first conference in 2012, as a first-year undergraduate representing Venezuela, thinking, what on earth am I doing here? Everyone else here is so smart. They know so much. What am I going to contribute? And if you feel that way, either now or when you make that first walk to the microphone for your first speech, rest assured that nearly everyone else in the room is feeling the same. You've earned your place here. You may be nervous, nearly everyone is, but don't let that stop you from taking your place at the table. And secondly, once you realize that you share more with others than you think, I hope it becomes easier to embrace the parts where we're different. Diplomacy involves disagreements, but difference is something that can be enjoyed. Our conference theme, Radical Empathy, Peace Reimagined, is a call to arms for active empathy. It challenges you to silence those competitive instincts that we can all sometimes rush to when put in a room with hundreds of others and told to win their support. Instead, embrace exploration through empathy. It will reward you with an understanding of perspectives removed far from your own and a network otherwise unimaginable. And as I look tensely at the timer counting down my own allotted time, my final suggestion would be to value every minute. This thing that you've been working for all year will be over before you know it if you're only looking at the end goal. Savor every moment along the way, and even during those challenging moments, try to appreciate the journey that has brought you here. They are my suggestions. You can accept or reject them as you wish. After all, I'm still learning myself, and I can't wait to learn from and be inspired by you all over the course of the next 5 days. And I return finally to the people who have taught me a tremendous amount this year, our volunteer staff. You will see them this week in your committees and around conference, and they are an incredible treasure trove of knowledge and experience. Speak to them. They have worked tirelessly to prepare your committees and this conference as a whole for the past 10 months, and it is my pleasure now to introduce your NMUN Secretariat. I will introduce them by name, at which point I invite each member to stand, but this is the crucial bit. Please hold your much-deserved applause until everyone has been introduced. The Undersecretary General for Peace and Security, Eileen Austin. The Undersecretary General for, remember my advice, Undersecretary General for Development and Human Rights, Danielle Curtis. The Undersecretary General for the Economic and Social Council, Martin Schunk. The Undersecretary General for the General Assembly, Chase Mitchell. Assistant Secretary General, Leila Fowd. Assistant Secretary General, Zachary Parker. And Undersecretary General for Conference Management, Bandelio Delgado. And finally, our volunteer staff of directors and assistant directors. So please join me in showing your appreciation for them all. And so, thank you all for making this conference possible, and I hope you have a truly wonderful week ahead. Thank you.
We called an audible there because we missed a part of the program before. I was the only other person that knew about the movie slide, and we skipped over one of the other introductions. So if you don't mind, we had another welcome that's brief after the speech from the President of the General Assembly, but it's a short video welcome for someone that you will recognize. So if we can do the video on the screen that we skipped before.
Thank you for taking part in this Model United Nations Conference and for believing in the power of global cooperation to solve global problems. We need your engagement and ideas today more than ever. Conflict, poverty, hunger, and inequalities are on the rise. A surge of mistrust and misinformation is polarizing people and paralyzing societies. Human rights are under assault. And the triple planetary crisis, climate disruption, pollution, and catastrophic biodiversity loss is threatening lives and livelihoods everywhere. But we can turn things around. Humanity has shown time and again that we are capable of great things when we work together across geographies and generations. To do so, we need an inclusive and networked multilateralism, one that ensures young people have a seat and a say in shaping our common future. We need your creativity, courage, and commitment. I draw hope from seeing your generation challenge the status quo and call for transformative challenge. The United Nations is your steadfast ally in striving to build a more just, sustainable, inclusive, and peaceful world for all. Thank you.
So as we conclude the opening ceremony, I'll pick up from Max and finish introducing the head table. To your left and my right, the co-presidents of National Model United Nations, Professor Richard Murgo, Professor Clarissa Estep. Thank you for being here with us. We're doing pretty well. We have the President of the General Assembly. we have the Secretary General of the United Nations, we have the Deputy Secretary General of National Model United Nations, and as we're sort of reaching for the future, sort of has a nice ring to it to say, Madam Secretary General of National Model United Nations 2023. My pleasure to introduce Lauren Kaiser.
Thank you, Michael. Well, those are some tough acts to follow, and I'm sad to say I don't have any Nicolas Cage slides in my presentation. A heads up would have been nice, Max. Delegates, faculty advisors, member of the NMUN Staff Secretariat, NMUN board members, HQ, guests, and all friends, welcome. I knew this was going to be hard to get through, but it's going to be tough, so just hold on. I think that's the entire list. As I was writing the greeting in my head, I was thinking, surely I'm going to miss someone. But when I think again, friends encompasses everyone in the room. We're all here together because we believe in the life-changing experience of Model United Nations and the importance of international cooperation. So whether we've met before or this is our first time, I'm so pleased to welcome you to this incredible experience we are all about to embark on, and to call you now my friends. This past year, our team has been hard at work preparing for this week, as Max has illustrated in the work that went into the background guides. But behind the scenes, our logistics team has been working just as hard. For me, NMUN has been the marker of the seasons of the year, much more predictably than the truly unpredictable Texas weather. The start of the conference is by far my favorite season, and I hope that it is for you too. I'd like to take another moment to recognize our incredible NMUN New York 2023 staff team. They volunteered their free time, vacation days, nights, and weekends to research and write, support the logistical work of the conference, and prepared to do their best in facilitating the work this week. It would not be possible without them. Thank you, team. It's been a joy and a privilege to work with you so far this year. All of you in this room have worked hard to learn your committees, your member states, positions on topics, and the inner workings of the international system. I encourage each of you to remember the work that went in for everyone in this room to get here, and to honor that work by coming together this week to build the culture we want to see at this conference, centered on our theme, Radical Empathy, Peace Reimagined. What does that look like? Radical empathy is actively working to understand each other on a deeper level. This requires all of us to be vulnerable, to acknowledge when we make mistakes and that others will make mistakes too. And when that happens, we take action to do better, to change our behaviors, and to change our words. We have to be open to others' lived experiences, listen to them, and learn from them. The result is a deeper connection with others, but also with ourselves. We chose this theme because we believe that a more active and authentic practice of empathy and understanding will build trust, be an enabler for change, and that is the foundation upon which peace will be built. This week, you have the opportunity to put that into action. In truth, you've already taken the first step in practicing radical empathy, just by being here. You've decided to dig deep to understand more fully the global community. You've spent hours researching a UN member state, one you may not have known much about before, learning about its unique history and its culture. You've learned about the languages spoken in your member states, the religions practiced by its citizens. You've learned how all of these and more shape its view on a variety of topics, and are working hard this week to try to see the world from a new vantage point, through the lens of the member state that you are simulating this week. While you are in committee, you will be emulating your member state and trying to propose actionable policy solutions from their point of view. That is simulating radical empathy by trying to approach the world from a different point of view. A more holistic view, and more engaging too, I hope. Your work in committee is important, your working papers, motions, debates, and speeches. But nothing is more important than the way in which we treat those around us. The goal is, of course, to be creative and challenge yourself to come up with solutions to the world's most intractable problems. The most important goal this week, and every week, is to build the world we want to see in each and every small interaction, in the seemingly small, inconsequential choices we make every single day, in the respect we give others, and also in ourselves. It's in our work to be authentic and kind. I can tell you from experience that years and years after this conference, you won't remember the exact details of your speeches, or the content of the amazing operative clauses you will inevitably write. You will remember how this experience made you feel. How the words of a fellow delegate said to you after you gave your first speech with trembling hands, a shaking voice, and wobbly legs made you feel empowered and encouraged. You'll remember the excitement of seeing your work become a draft resolution and the anticipation of waiting to see if it will become a resolution. You'll remember the feeling of giving a speech in the plenary session and the awe-inspiring moment of walking to the General Assembly Hall for the first time. Filled with a sense of a week well spent, with accomplishment for doing something hard, even when you were scared, and even when you couldn't make it through a speech. But you'll look back with amazement that if this is what your peers can do in a simulation, imagine what they can do out in the real world. My charge to you this week is to take on this opportunity and this privilege with thoughtful care. Be the delegate someone remembers more than a decade later that turned a moment of anxiety into a moment of feeling of pure accomplishment. That's a true story, by the way. You don't know where those 6 words of a note of kindness can lead. It may lead from one day being terrified of giving a speech to a room of 300 people, when your faculty advisor suggested that maybe you should hold the paper with 2 hands so it trembles a little less visibly, to standing at the podium, mercifully having something to hold on to, hide the wobbly legs, but there's nothing really that you can do about the trembling voice. I have no doubt in your abilities and in your commitment to this conference and to each other to build a better world. A world of reimagining what peace might look like, centered on a practice of radical empathy. Let's get to work. With that, what do you think, Max? Should we declare this NMUN New York conference open? On behalf of myself and the Deputy Secretary General, I declare the NMUN New York 2023 conference officially open.
Don't leave yet. There's a couple announcements. I know you are eager to go to committee. However, in order for those committees to start, these people need to get to committee first. So if you could indulge me in letting them go to committee, things will go more smoothly from there. Be free. Secondly, for those of you that are paying attention, her faculty advisor was sitting right there listening to the speech. It was pretty cool to watch. Couple of other housekeeping announcements. For those of you inspired by the diplomats speaking today thinking, wow, working for the UN, that sounds pretty cool, and who haven't read the program, tomorrow morning, for those of you that don't have a mission briefing scheduled, at 10 a.m. in the Trianon Ballroom, the United Nations Human Resource Department is coming to you to talk about how to get jobs working for the United Nations. 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., do I have those times right? Yeah. 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. tomorrow in the Trianon Ballroom. The UN is sending recruiters to National Model United Nations, which we think they should have done sooner, but they finally came around to it. So, a slightly more exclusive invitation while you're all busy working in committee. Faculty advisors, if you haven't seen the schedule, slightly different than in the past. The welcome reception, rather than being at the end of the week, is actually in the beginning of the week at 7:45 tonight in Concourse A in the lower level. If you have a purple faculty ribbon, the welcome reception is tonight. I think that is it for announcements. You are welcome to start going to committee slowly. What we're going to do to play you out, there's a video, one of our video contest winners from Collin College. We'll play that on the screen if you want to watch a video. If you want to start walking to committee, do that as well. Welcome to NMUN New York 2023!
Hi guys. We made it! For over 13 years, Collin College has participated in the New York National Model United Nations Conference. After 2 years of COVID, our team has finally returned to the city in person.
NMUN is a simulation of the United Nations for college students, giving young adults the opportunity to research pressing topics related to the real-world issues and act as a representative of the country selected.
Guess what?
You know what?
You tell it.
Okay, I start my own working paper. We have like 17 signatories. It's fun to combine. And like this is my whole group right here.
Students have the opportunity to gain real-world experiences, learn how to think diplomatically, build friendships, expand their skill set, and learn how to excel as a leader.
Plus, like, once you get into the mechanics of how the thing works, it's not too bad. There's a lot of socializing, you make some friends, and if I can make it through it, so can you.
To prepare for the conference, we were quizzed with drill questions, researched and wrote our position papers, and brainstormed innovative solutions to global issues. We worked on confidently delivering speeches and team building in our weekly Friday meetings.
It's waiting.
Model UN to me is family.
Being true to who you are. Community.
Love.
Teamwork. Inclusion.
Friendship.
Confidence.
Good people mainly. I've made a couple friendships that will hopefully last a lifetime. And I really just enjoy it. It's just nice being in a place where everybody's so positive and we're all working together.
Thank you. All of those. You're sweet, but that push passes in 3.